Now let's apply the product rule to graphs and tables. We have two functions, f of x and g of x. And then we have another function, r of x, which is x squared times g of x. And p of x is f of x times g of x. All right, so in the first one, they give us the value of the derivative of g at -4 is 2. And it asks, what is the value of p prime of -4? So let's break that down. It's using the function p. And p of x was f of x times g of x. That was given to us at the top of the page. The derivative of a product is going to be the derivative of the first times the second plus the first times the derivative of the second. Now we want to find that at -4. So I need to find f prime at -4 times g of -4 plus f of -4 times g prime of -4. So I'm going to have to use these graphs and use the information given to me. So at -4, we're right here. So what's the slope at -4? Well, it's a -1. Times g of -4. So at -4, my graph's up here, and that looks like it's a 6. F of -4 is the y value, which is -1, times g prime of -4. Well, that's a slant. Oh, thank goodness they told it to us right here. -1 times 6 is -6. That's -2 for a total of -8. R prime of -2 equals 20. What's the value of g prime of -2? Well, I better break this down. What is r? Well, if I look back at the original problem, it told me that r was x squared times g of x. Well, what's the derivative of r? Be the derivative of the first times the second plus the original first times the derivative of the second. And it's talking about things happening at -2. So r prime of -2. Well, that means I'm going to plug in -2 for all my x's. And let's see what we know. They gave us r prime of -2 is 20. I know 2 times -2 is -4. G of -2 is right here. That's a -4. No, that's a -3. -2 squared is 4. And g prime of -2, I don't know. Oh, they want me to actually find it. So in other words, I need to solve this equation for that value. That turns into a +12. So I need to subtract 12 from both sides. Then divide by 4. And we found our value. How awesome. We can also use all that information to find the equations of the tangent lines at values. What do we need to find the equation of a tangent line? Well, we would need to know the point on P of 4. So to find the point, I would need to know P of negative 4, which would be F of negative 4 times G of negative 4. Well, okay, F of negative 4 we found it was negative 1. And G of negative 4 we found was a positive 6. So P of negative 4 is negative 6. That means I have a point on this graph that I've never even seen. That's negative 4, negative 6. To find the slope, I need to find P prime of negative 4, which we found in the previous part, is negative 8. So to find the tangent line, it's going to be y plus 6 equals negative 8, slope, x plus 4. Easy peasy. Find the equation of the line tangent to r of x when x is negative 2. So I need to know r of negative 2 to find the point. Well, r was x squared times g of x. So that's a 4. And g of negative 2 was negative 3. So r of negative 2 is negative 12. And I need to know my slope, which is going to be r prime of negative 2, which is actually given to us. It's 20. So the equation of my tangent line is y plus 12 equals 20 for the slope times x plus 2. Now let's see how we can work with a table. Estimate the value of f prime of 3.5. Well, I don't have 3.5 as an x value in the table. So when I have to estimate a derivative, I'm going to have to use the slope of the secant line that's around it. So in other words, I've got to use 3 and 4. So I'm going to do f of 4 minus f of 3 over 4 minus 3. Slope. Well, f of 4 was 1. F of 3 is negative 2. So minus a negative 2 over 4 minus 3 is 1. And I get, that'd be 3. Q of x equals 2 times f of x minus 4 times g of x. What is the value of q prime of 4? So here's q of x. If I take the derivative of q, that's just going to be 2 times f prime minus 4 times g prime. Well, I'm evaluating that at 4. So f prime of 4 minus 4 times g prime of 4. F prime at 4 is 2. G prime is negative 3. So I've got 4. That turns into plus 12. So 16. Ooh, new function p. P is negative 2 f of x times g of x. So we've got a product rule. P prime. The derivative of the first is going to be negative 2 f prime of x times g of x just like it stands. And then we'd have plus negative 2 f of x times the derivative of g. And I want to evaluate that at 3. So that's negative 2 f prime of 3 times g of 3. That'll turn into minus 2 f of 3 g prime of 3. So let's look at the table. F prime of 3 is going to be negative 4. G of 3 is negative 3. F of 3 is negative 2. G prime of 3 is positive 2. So you're really just looking up values in a table. Let's see, that's negative 24. That's going to be plus 8. Total of negative 16. Find the equation of the line tangent to the graph of v of x equals x cubed times f of x when x is negative 1. So I need to find two things. I need to find the point, which is going to be, I need to find v of negative 1. So we're just plugging in negative 1 into the equation. That's going to give me negative 1, and then f of negative 1 is a 2, so that's going to be negative 2. To find the slope, I need to find v prime of negative 1. V prime of negative 1, we'll have to use the product rule. Derivative of the first, so maybe I should just do it for x first, and then we'll plug in the negative 1. That would be 3x squared times the second plus x cubed times the derivative of the second. Now I can plug in negative 1. That'll be so much better. 3 times negative 1 squared times f of negative 1 plus negative 1 cubed times f prime of negative 1. Now we'll have to look back at our table for some of this. That's going to turn into a 3. F of negative 1 in the table was a 2. It's going to turn into a negative 1. And that's a 1. So I've got 6 minus 1, which is a 5. So here's my y value, x value. So y plus 2 equals the slope times x plus 1. Ooh, K is neat. If you want to try this one on your own and then pause it and come back, K of x equals all that. And I'm going to try to find K prime of 3. Derivative of the first times the second plus 2 f of x plus 3 times the derivative of the second, which is going to be negative g prime. Now I'm just going to plug in a 3. Gonna have to be careful with all these parentheses. You could get lost in them. I don't know how you get lost in a parentheses, but you can. When I look back at the table for f prime of 3, that's a negative 4. This is 3 minus g of 3, which was a negative 3. That's going to be plus 3. Plus f of 3 was negative 2. And then g prime of 3 was 2. So I better do my order of operations carefully. That's going to be a negative 8 times a 6 plus, it's negative 4 plus 3 is a negative 1 times negative 2. It's going to be a negative 48 plus a positive 2, which is negative 46.